Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea Show here on my YouTube channel. I am, of course, your host, John Campea, and it is an honor and a privilege to have you joining me here today as we talk about all of our favorite things, world of movies, television shows, all sorts of things like that. Here's how today's show is going to go. I've got 5 topics picked out from emails that you guys have sent in to me. Now, how do you get a topic or a question on the John Campea Show? It's really quite simple. You just email me anytime at john@thejohncampeashow.com. That's john@thejohncampeashow.com. And this is important, guys. Make sure you put the word topic in the subject line. Put the word topic in the subject line or else I might not see your message. Also, don't forget, keep your email to 90 words or less, or else it's just too long for me to read and too long for me to even physically fit on the screen, even if I wanted to. Now, after I get through those 5 topics you guys have emailed into me, I'm going to go over to the live viewers. For those of you guys who are watching live, and thank you for being here live, near the end of the show, I'm going to save a few minutes to take your live questions. Send in a live question to me on Twitter simply by tweeting me at John Campea. Send your questions in there close to the end of the show, and maybe you will see your tweet pop up on the bottom of the screen. Now, the first thing I'm going to mention here, before I even get to the topics, is just a short while ago, we've been talking a little bit about this new movie coming out called The Phantom Thread, which is supposedly going to be Daniel Day-Lewis's, greatest actor of all time, his final movie. And the movie comes out in December, and there's been no trailers, no marketing, no anything. And we were wondering, hey, what the heck's going on with that? And wouldn't you know it, today the trailer drops. Beautiful trailer. Haunting trailer. And you know what it reminds me of? I feel like Daniel Day-Lewis in this trailer. You know that Murder on the Orient Express trailer that kind of ends with Kenneth Branagh going, "My name is Hercule Poirot, and I am probably the greatest detective in the world." I feel like Daniel Day-Lewis in this trailer is just going, "My name is Daniel Day-Lewis, and I'm probably the greatest actor in the world." It just feels like he's doing that. Anyway, the trailer looks great. I'll probably analyze it a little bit more in another video another time, but that trailer is dropped. So for those of you who've been looking for it and been wanting to see it, make sure you go and check that out because it is available on YouTube right now. Okay, guys, with all of that out of the way, I want to mention one other thing here, and I forgot to pull a picture of it. Let me see if I've got a picture available. I certainly hope that I do. And I don't right now, wouldn't you know? But anyway, last night I had the opportunity and the chance to go to Halloween Horror Nights, which is just an amazing thing to do. If you live anywhere near the Los Angeles area, if you can go down to Hollywood Horror Nights, that's at Universal Studios. This was my second year going. And it is such a blast. I mean, a lot of their horror mazes and everything have a lot of movie themes. Like almost all of them were movie themes, like everything from The Shining to even Happy Death Day, the brand new horror film. Happy Death Day has kind of its own section of the park. It's really a lot of fun. But at any rate, a lot of you guys remember gold medal Olympic swimmer Cody Miller. Anyway, so he gave us a call. He was going to be in town. So him and his wonderful new wife, Allie, myself and Allison went down to Universal Studios last night, had dinner, toured around the Hollywood theme park. It's my second year going to that. So if you guys have a chance to go and do that, by all means, go and do that. It's worth the trip to LA. If you're thinking about coming down to LA in October, come down just to go to that because it's an awful lot of fun. Okay, anyway, with all that out of the way, now let's get on to the first question of the day. And the first question today comes to us from Nathan Oswald. And Nathan Oswald writes, "Why does the director seem to get the most blame for a movie not being good? Even if the directing is good and the writing is clunky, the director gets blamed. The writer is the one who makes the dialogue." Well, thanks a lot for the question, man. And, you know, I've said for a long time, there are a lot of moving pieces into what makes a movie good. And there are hundreds, sometimes thousands of people using their talents and their energies and their efforts to make a movie what it is. Absolutely, no one person makes a movie. It's just not the case. However, it is also fair to say that the most important person in that cog is the director, because she or he ultimately has the final kind of say about what goes on in front of the camera, on that spot, in that moment, on set. Now, when you're talking about bad scripts, yeah, it is difficult to make a good movie out of a bad script. It's difficult, it is. But here's the thing. if you're on set and you're talking about bad dialogue wasn't the director's fault, it's the scriptwriter's fault. Well, this is the problem with that. Is that a lot of times something works on the printed page. Like you can read a script and think, oh my God, this is a great movie. Even if it really wouldn't be, but it's one thing to read a script and see something on the printed page. It's another thing to then see it in action. This is why guys like Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel Studios, says that when they make a movie, they love their script. They don't start making their movie until they love their script, but when they make a movie, they realize just because it looks good on the page doesn't mean it's going to look good once we start putting on screen. And so Marvel, for their big blockbuster hits, they make sure they schedule some pickup shooting time. They pick up reshoot time. So because they know something's not going to work on screen the way it works on page, so we want to be able to go back and adjust that. So let's say you've got a line of dialogue in a script, right, that says, Mama, I've always known since the day I was born that I was different, a different kind of man. And you read that on screen or on page and you think, yeah, that's a great line. That works. But if you're the director and now you're sitting in the director's chair 2 or 3 years after that's been written in the script, and you are now there and you are seeing the lines play out, then that's your job at that point to go, you know what? This isn't working. Tell you what, Bobby, whoever the actor's name is, try a take, change up the line. Like, we're going to keep the take that you did, but now try a couple of takes where you change up that line a bit. Let's try the line, Mama, I this, and this, and now ultimately I know who I am. And I try that, or try this, or try this, or try this. Ultimately, it's the director is the final stop. The director is the final stop. And that's why I believe most, not all, of the credit, but a good share of the credit for a movie being really good needs to go to the director, but a good share for the blame of the movie being bad needs to go to the director as well. There are obviously exceptions to the rule, absolutely, but for the most part, that's the way, because the director is the one sitting there on set, hearing the lines, watching how the action plays out. They've got to be the one to know and recognize this is working or this isn't working and make changes as they need to. I mean, it's just absolutely necessary, because for the screenwriter, maybe the screenwriter wrote it on the page and everybody thinks it looks great on the page. The director is the one who's got to be in charge of making sure that whatever they do, it's got to play out well on camera. And that's why they're the stopgap person. Again, no movie 100% owes its credit to the director. No bad movie owes 100% of the blame to the director. But if you want to talk about who is most responsible, it's the director. And that's why it's the biggest, most important job. But maybe you guys have different thoughts or opinions on that. Jump into the comment section below and let me know what you think. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Noah Kaser, who writes, Hey John, big fan. Thank you so much, Noah. My question is, do you think that nudity makes a movie better? Do you think it's necessary or unnecessary? Keep up the good work, and glad to hear Anne is back. Yeah, Anne, who has been gone for nearly 2 months, is now finally back, which is great. But look, the question you're raising is a question that has been going around the Hollywood industry, I mean, really since the movies were born. You know, some movies use nudity, some do not. Is nudity necessary? Is it ever justified to use nudity? Is there any justifiable reason to not use nudity? I mean, nudity is one of these big issues, and while on its surface it sounds like a topic a bunch of just horny little teenagers are talking about, it is actually one of the more mature debates that goes on. It's like, okay, we understand nudity is a part of life, blah, blah, but is it needed? Do you have to put that in a movie? Or it's like, hey, there's no reason not to put it in a movie. Like, there are two extremes to this all the time. And I think my response to the question is nudity necessary, is not going to surprise any of you, which is sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Let me give you a good example of when it's not. I am not a big fan of gratuitous anything. And gratuitous in the terms of the movies, I kind of use that phrase meaning there was no point to it. Okay, so like I love big action movies, lots of violence and all that kind of stuff, but I don't like gratuitous violence. So like if there's some really horrible act of violence carried out in a movie that just did not need that scene, like there was no point in that scene of gratuitous violence being there, it was just gratuitous, I don't appreciate that. Nudity for no reason, I'll be honest, I also don't appreciate that. Like, again, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against filthy, bring on the filthy, I love the filthy, but when it's just gratuitous and it doesn't have a point and it didn't serve a purpose and it doesn't actually do anything for your movie, I don't like that. Here's a good example. Remember that movie with Hugh Jackman and Halle Berry and John Travolta called Swordfish? There was a very famous scene in that movie where they actually showed Halle Berry topless. It was the first time Halle Berry, one of the most beautiful women in the history of Hollywood, Halle Berry did a topless scene. And everybody started talking about, oh my gosh, Halle Berry did a topless scene, blah, blah, blah. But if you watch Swordfish, there was no point to that. It was just somebody, let's get Halle Berry to show us her chest. There was no point to it. It didn't serve anything. It was just, frankly, it was kind of jarring. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. As a younger kid and that happens, I go, wow. But I mean, at the same time, I sit back and go, it was pointless. There was no point to that. Sure. So there is gratuitous nudity that is not needed in many movies. However, movies are art, and they're art that are supposed to be conveying and reflecting back the human experience. And nudity, in some cases, in some ways, in some shapes, and in some forms, can be a very powerful thing of either nostalgia or stirring emotion or remembering things that you just can't do without it. Like, for instance, let's take the movie, I don't know, Fast Times at Ridgemount High, right? Fast Times at Ridgemount High with Sean Penn. You know, that was a movie that was capturing the American experience about being a teenager and growing up in America and what the culture was like and all that kind of stuff. To do that sort of a movie, and I'm actually impressed they did as much of that movie without nudity as they did, but to do that movie, and if you're really trying to capture like the young American male living at that time. And yes, it was a comedy, but it was also social commentary. If you're trying to capture that experience, you're not going to do it as effectively without nudity. Let's look at a Kubrick film. I've got the picture up here, Eyes Wide Shut. You can't understand the visceral nature of what Kubrick was going for in that movie without nudity. Nudity is kind of the thing that pushes that experience to the point that the filmmaker as an artist wants you as an audience member to be in. Now, yes, sometimes nudity is just for the sake of showing nudity. And again, that's gratuitous. It doesn't do anything for me as an audience member. Sometimes it does everything to express the experience, like a Fast Time at Ridgemount High. Sometimes it's meant as a way of stirring the right emotion that you want in the audience member, a Basic Instinct, an Eyes Wide Shut. And you know, then you get shows like Game of Thrones, which does a little bit of both. Sometimes they just put nudity in there for the hell of it. And sometimes they have nudity that really makes the scene more powerful. It is just another tool in the director's belt that is like any other tool. Sometimes it can be useful. Sometimes it's not so useful. Use it when it's useful and use it the right way to get the maximum impact of what you're trying to convey. And if you do that, then it's necessary. Now, there also used to be a time, you know, when I was a little kid and when you were a kid or whatever, where it's like, if all you wanted was nudity, like the internet wasn't easily accessible at the time to just go online and see nudity anytime you want to. So the need for gratuitous nudity in movies seems to have lessened. I hope we realize it's lessened. If you just want nudity, you can just go online and get it. But, I mean, for today, you ask the question, is it necessary? And I will say, sometimes. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. There is no blanket statement, yes or no, to this, in my opinion. Because sometimes using nudity in a gratuitous way can pull you out of a film. It can be jarring. It can disrupt the flow of a movie. Sometimes used right, you can't keep the flow of the nudity or of the movie without it. So anyway, that's my thought on it. I know everybody's got wildly different opinions when it comes to the topic of nudity in films. Whether it's right, whether it's wrong, whether it's needed, whether it's not needed, all that kind of stuff. I want to hear your guys' opinions because I'm not in concrete on mine. Jump into the comments section and let me know what you guys think about this topic. All right, let's move on now to the next topic. And the next topic today comes to us from one of my Patreon supporters, Jeremiah Sneed, who writes, everyone's making a huge deal about The Punisher coming out on Justice League weekend. I feel I'll see Justice League and binge The Punisher. However, I'm hearing The Punisher will take away box office from Justice League. I think something like this happened before. Your thoughts? Well, when you're saying you think something like this happened before, I can't remember which Netflix show it was, but I think one Netflix show like dropped a week before a particular DC Cinematic Universe movie came out. Dropping something on television a week early, I didn't think that's not the same thing. That's not affecting a movie. You guys heard me mention the other day that I do think that dropping Punisher on the exact same day that Justice League comes out is a disruptive thing. It's going to be disruptive. Now, we can debate how disruptive, whether it's just going to be a tiny bit disruptive or a huge bit of disruption. But I think it would be a naive position to say it won't affect it at all. I think that's a naive position. Because if you're saying that there's nobody in America who is now going to skip Justice League, at least just for the opening weekend, to stay home and watch Punisher, if you're suggesting there's nobody in America saying that, that's a bit of a naive position to take. There are people out there who are going to do that. Now, we can discuss and debate, is that a big number of people? Is that a tiny number of people? We talked about that before. Will it ultimately affect Justice League's box office overall? I don't know about that. Because to me, when I'd say like there is going to be a disruptive influence, I'm merely talking about the opening weekend. Will it hurt its opening weekend? And I do believe it's going to have some kind of impact on the opening weekend of Justice League. Again, big or tiny, that's up for debate, but it will have some kind of impact. But at the end of the day, by the time Justice League has finished its run, will it really have that big of an impact on it? And I got to say no. I think, look, if there's somebody who's planning on going to see Justice League, maybe Punisher might get them to skip out just going the first day or two because they want to stay home and binge watch Punisher. That's fine. But I think anybody that's looking forward to going to see Justice League, they're going to go see Justice League. Whether it's on the opening weekend or the first Tuesday or the first Wednesday or the first Thursday, or they're just going to go second weekend. They're going to go see it for the most part. So while I did make the position the other day that I do think dropping Punisher on the same day as Justice League is a disruptive thing, that's really for the opening weekend. In the grand picture, I think it'll all even itself out. So we'll just have to wait and see how that all plays out. All right, we got 2 more topics to get through from email, and then I'm going to go to your guys' live questions. So let's go to the next one. The next question today comes to us from Dhruv, who writes, "Hey, John, my question is, do you think this year is the best year for comic book movies? Other than Justice League, which we don't know about yet, all the other movies have done excellent, some, like Logan, becoming a fixture in the running for the best comic book movie ever. If Justice League at least gets, like, say, 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, do you think this could be considered the best year for comic book movies?" And you know what? On paper, you wouldn't have thought so going in. I think a lot of us comic book movie fans suspected a strong year for comic book movies. We didn't really know what we were going to get with Logan. Spider-Man Homecoming was a question mark. Marvel and Sony working together. The last Spider-Man movie wasn't so great. So that was a bit of a question mark. Thor Ragnarok. I love the first Thor, but not everybody does. And everybody agrees that the second Thor was a step down in quality from the first one. So what are we going to get with that? Wonder Woman was a question mark. Because while some people liked all the DC Cinematic Universe films so far, they have struggled with being divisive amongst fans. And then I think Justice League, I had that question mark about, other DC films have been divisive, but I think more people had more enthusiasm and more higher expectations for Justice League. But really, sitting in the middle of 2016, looking at the comic book movie slate coming up for 2017, it was a question mark. There was a question mark about the major Marvel, DC, Fox superhero films. There was a big question mark. And then the movie started coming out. We saw Logan, which blew us away. Spider-Man Homecoming was excellent. Wonder Woman was really solid. We've got Thor Ragnarok is solid. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I still think was good. I think Guardians of the Galaxy 2, out of all the major comic book superhero movies, is probably the weakest of all the comic book superhero movies that have come out this year, but still good. Still good. But, like Wonder Woman, Thor Ragnarok, Logan, Spider-Man Homecoming, we're all better than it. And now we've got what's left is Justice League. And you know what? I will agree with your email. If Justice League can do what I suspect it will do, which will be over 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, be a better film than Batman vs. Superman, if it can do that, Justice League doesn't even have to be like a mind-altering, amazing cinematic experience. It doesn't even have to be that. If Justice League at this point, I think, is just really solid, if Justice League is solid, I would entertain the debate that 2017 has been the best comic book movie year. The best year for comic book movies maybe that we've ever had. Because if you're talking about the average across the board, there have been years with better comic book movies, but they've also come along with them some real stinker of comic book movies as well. Across the board, this has been a solid year. And if Justice League is good, and we can look back on 2017 and say the worst comic book movie that year was Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which in and of itself was still a solid movie, still did well. If you look at the audience ratings and the critic ratings, it did solid. Box office numbers obviously were very impressive. And if that's what we can point at and say that's the worst of the year, then I think you've got to have an argument that 2017 is the best one of the year. Now, it all depends on your criteria. Because some people will say, you've got to judge best year, for comic book movies in terms of which year released the best comic book movies. I don't do that, but some other people do, and that's fair. Then you'll get some people like me who will judge it on, you don't just judge it by which ones were the best movies that year, you judge it by all the movies that year and average it out. And I think if you look at it the way I'm looking at it, if Justice League turns out to be solid and really good, you've got a firm argument to make that 2017 is the best year ever. Now, maybe some of you are already screaming at your computer monitors, but John, 2000 and this, 2000 and this, which is great. I mean, that's the awesome thing about being film fans is we're all going to have these passionate opinions. I want to hear, let me ask you guys this. Let's take 2017 out of it for a second. What year would you say has been the best year for comic book movies? Take 2017 out of it for a minute. I want to know what you think was the best year and why. Jump down to the comments section and let me know your thoughts. Okay, now we move on to the final email question and topic of the day, and then I'm going to go over to take live questions. And the final email topic of the day comes to us from Auntie Mizvik, who writes, how come Warner Brothers allowed Joss Whedon to cut Justice League to 121 minutes? This type of movie should be the longest in the DCEU, especially since it introduces new characters, but it looks like it's the shortest. Well, thanks a lot for the question, man. And yes, for those of you who have not heard, it sounds like it's official now because I think even Fandango is saying that the official runtime for Justice League is 121 minutes. Now, we had heard different numbers before, like hearing 110 minutes, and now we're hearing 121 minutes. It looks like it's going to be 121. I'm not willing to stake my life on that, but it looks like that's going to be the runtime. So 2 hours, 1 minute, just a hair over 2 hours. And I've been getting emails like this from Auntie and from a lot of people, and seeing a lot of people discussing, why is it so short? Why is it too short? 121 minutes is too short. And you know what? I have to disagree. Because here's the thing. You do not know. I do not know how long this movie should be. And we will not know how long this movie should be or should have been until we see it. There are movies that come out that are 100 minutes long that I've walked out of and gone, you know what? That movie, the way it was, would have been even better if you sliced like 8 minutes out of it and made it like 92 minutes. It would have increased the pace. I think it would have cut out some of the dead space that the film had that wasn't really necessary. It would have been better. There are some movies I've walked out of that have been 2 hours and 15 minutes long that I've gone, I felt like they needed another 10 minutes in there. I feel like they just needed a little bit more space and a little bit more time and made this film even longer. You just don't know until you see the film. Look, one of the most celebrated movies of all time, Princess Bride. One of the best movies ever, Princess Bride. Thank you, Rob Reiner. That movie is magic and magnificent and is now celebrated with families over generations. The movie's amazing. That movie, you had to introduce all these characters nobody had ever heard of. You had to, invent the Man in Black, the Dread Pirate Roberts. You had to introduce Buttercup. You had to introduce Miracle Mike, Inigo Montoya, the giant character, Vincini, the Six-Fingered Man, the albino. I mean, you had so many characters. Prince Humperdinck. You had to introduce all these characters that nobody had ever heard of, introduce them all, get them into the story, have the main body of the story, and then conclude the story. And you had to do that all in one movie. You know how long that movie was? 98 minutes. Is anybody going to tell me that Princess Bride isn't great? Is anybody going to tell me that Princess Bride wasn't long enough? It was perfect because it found for that movie its spot, and its spot was 98 minutes long. And there are thousands of films that we can talk about that are some of the greatest films of all time that are south of 2 hours long. And now we're talking about Justice League, which even at 121 minutes is 23 minutes longer than The Princess Bride. That's an entire half-hour episode of television at 23 minutes when you minus out the ads. So that's all of Princess Bride plus an entire half-hour episode of television on top of that. Now look, we might come out of Justice League going, man, that needed another 15 minutes. Or we might come out of Justice League going, that was about 20 minutes too long. This one should have been like 100 minutes, 105 minutes. We just don't know until we see it. And the excuse that I'm hearing from people saying, but you're introducing new characters. Every movie introduces you to all brand new characters. The first time you watched any movie for the first time that wasn't a sequel, it's introducing you to all brand new characters. That doesn't mean it has to be over 2 hours long. All right. You know, one of my most fun movies of the year is Girls Trip. Love that movie. All characters I've never seen or met before. And that movie was not all that long. And it was one of the most fun movies of the year. So I reject this notion that Justice League at 121 minutes is too long or is too short. I reject that because there's just no knowing. 2 hours is considered by a lot of people to be the sweet spot, the exact right length of a movie. A lot of people consider that to be the target that people should aim for. For me, I think in comedies, I think like 95 minutes is the sweet spot. For action and drama and things like that, I think 2 hours is the sweet spot. But again, until we see Justice League and get a sense of its pace and of its timing and of its cadence and of its flow, we just have no way of saying that 121 minutes is right, 121 minutes is too long, 121 minutes is too short. There's just no justifiable criteria for us to make those claims when we haven't seen the movie. There's just none. So let's all take a breath about the runtime of the movie and just go see it and then evaluate. You know, somebody in the live chat board said near the beginning of the show, I would much rather have a good movie that's shorter than a bad movie that's longer. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Now look, of course, if we're assuming Justice League is going to be awesome, we always wish our awesome movies were longer. Yeah, but if you stretch a movie out past its optimum length, you're probably taking away from the movie a little bit too much. So again, I'm not saying that Justice League isn't too short. I'm saying there is no way to say it is until after we see the movie and wrap our heads around it and really see what it is. So, you know what? The funny thing is, it's not Marvel. It's not like the Marvel brain dead corporate zombie fanboys I'm seeing worrying about this. It's the DC fanboys who seem to be worried about this the most. To my brethren who are DC fans, let me say, don't sweat it. Don't worry about it yet. It's just the runtime. If Joss Whedon says this is the best runtime for our movie, the director of the two most successful comic book movies of all time, if Warner Brothers is looking at the final cut and going, yep, this is our proper runtime, then you know what? Just let's trust them for now. Maybe they're wrong, but there's no way for us to know it until we see the movie. November 17th is coming. We will know soon enough, but I would just tell everybody, don't panic. Take a breath. It's just the runtime. Okay? This isn't like Jason Momoa jumped on Twitter and said, Justice League's 121 minutes, and I'm outraged. This movie should have been at least 2 hours and 45 minutes. Well, okay, now then if one of the stars of the movie is complaining about it, maybe there's something to talk about. But that's not the case. So just take a breath, take a step back, and just watch the movie, and then we'll decide. And I got a feeling, you know what? I've just got a feeling that runtime is going to be the perfect runtime. I really do. Okay, let's now go over to the Twitter questions. Once again, I've saved a bunch of time here at the end of the show. Take your live Twitter questions for those of you who are watching live right now. Once again, make sure you're following me on Twitter, simply at John Campea. That's where you can find me. Tweet on in some questions, and let's get started with this. Remember, guys, I don't have time to screen these, so let's see what we got. The first tweet comes to us from Maglayao Paul, who writes, Hey, John, for box office, North America and domestic all means the same thing. The USA and Canada, right? Yes. The North American box office is domestic. Like when you hear the term domestic box office, that's actually not just the USA. Domestic box office also includes Canada. A lot of people don't know that, but that's what it actually includes. Canada is included in domestic box office numbers. So when you see that a movie made 85 million opening weekend, that includes Canada and the US. Next question. Hey, John, what do you think is an underrated sports film? I quite enjoyed Friday Night Lights. Thanks, and keep bringing the filthy. Will Chris Wood burn 83? I don't think you can call Friday Night Lights underrated. I think Friday Night Lights gets a lot of prop and gets a lot of praise from a lot of people. So I don't know that you can call it underrated because everybody who's seen it seems to like it. Maybe it's underappreciated, or maybe it's underknown. Maybe not enough people have seen it, but everybody who's seen it seems to agree that's a really good movie. The one to me, there's a couple. I always talk about Best of the Best. I think it's the ultimate guys movie. But besides that, you've also heard me talk about Mystery Alaska with Russell Crowe. That movie, right here. I love that movie. Mystery Alaska is so great. I love that movie. I think it's a sports movie that very, very few people have seen. It's got great heart. It's got great humor. I'm obviously a hockey guy, so it's got great hockey. So I'm really into it. So if you have not seen Mystery Alaska, I highly suggest you guys give it a shot. Go check that out. All right, let's move on to the next one. And the next one comes from H. Yinny B, who writes, John, I'm excited for the new Mutant, but my friend is skeptical about it. How well do you think the superhero theme will mesh with horror? Hey man, it's a good question. Look, we have talked about that New Mutants trailer a few times. And look, there is no doubt Fox continues to roll the dice and take chances. And, I mentioned this the other day, but it's worth saying again. It's easy for us now to go, oh, Deadpool, that wasn't a risk. Look what a big hit it was. That was brain dead. That was obvious. That was a no-brainer. Wrong. Just how quickly we forget. That was a big roll of the dice to do an R-rated comic book movie in the with a mainstream target as your audience. That was something that the modern age of comic book movies hasn't tried and hasn't done. It was a roll of the dice, and it paid off. Logan, it's easy for us to go, now, it's one of the best films of the year. To me, it's the best film of the year. Logan, sure. For them to get away from the more polished X-Men universe, take their most popular character, Wolverine, remove him from that, and plop it into this gritty R-rated Western of a film, that was rolling the dice. They didn't know how the audience and the fans would respond to that. They took a risk, and the risk paid off. This New Mutants thing, they keep pushing the envelope. They look, full marks to Fox. Even if New Mutants turns out to be terrible, bravo to Fox for trying this, because they're doing something right now that not DC, not Marvel, are really willing to try. And they're really pushing the boundaries and the limits of what is normal for this genre, for the comic book genre, and doing something completely different. Because man, that New Mutants trailer was not what I was expecting. That's straight up horror trailer. It feels like a straight up low budget horror trailer. And I mean that as a complimentary thing, because today what Blumhouse has done by making low budget horror amazing, but that's what it felt like to me. It felt like low budget, budget tight conscious horror, psychological horror. And it got me. It worked for me. I know it didn't work for everybody, and that's totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. And even though it worked for me, I don't know, maybe it'll fail and it'll be terrible, but full marks to them. I think it's gutsy. I think it's incredibly gutsy. In a world where everybody's complaining, the superhero movies are all kind of becoming formulaic, and really at their core, Marvel and DC films are pretty much the same thing and blah, blah, blah. And then Fox comes out and gives us a trailer like New Mutants, and people complain about it. It's like, you can't complain that everything's kind of starting to feel too formula to you, and then complain when they come out with a trailer that looks completely nothing like any other film. Again, the movie might suck, but I applaud Fox for taking the risks they are and the chances they are. I think it's gutsy, show some balls, and I hope it works. Let's see if it does. Okay. Let's see. Next one. I lost my place. Let's go over here. Fan Dan Guy writes, John Campea. Any wrestling movie biopics you'd like to see? I think a Montreal Screwjob movie could be amazing. I'm not sure. Like, the Montreal Screwjob is one of the most infamous, probably the most infamous thing ever in the business of wrestling. Like, obviously there are personal tragedies that exceed it, but in the business of wrestling, there's never been a more infamous thing than the Montreal Screwjob between Bret the Hitman Hart, Shawn Michaels. When Bret Hart was told he was supposed to win that match, and they screwed him over and had Shawn Michaels win the match, and all of the drama that unfolded after that. Crazy. Absolutely crazy stuff. It makes for a great documentary, and I've seen several documentaries and documentary shows and podcasts talk about the incident. I don't know if it plays well as an hour and a half, hour and 45 minute, 2 hour major motion picture over that one event. I don't know. Maybe it does. The one I am most interested in is, of course, the one they've already announced, but we haven't seen any movement on in a while, is Crossface, the Chris Benoit story. And that is just a fascinating story. Amidst the tragedy and the horror of it and it's just awful, but within it, I think there are lessons to learn, and I think it's an interesting and a cautionary tale about it, because, for those of you who don't know anything about the Chris Benoit story, Chris Benoit was this guy that everybody liked and everybody respected, and he was just a really good guy. And then one day they found him in his house that he had killed his wife and his kid and then killed himself. And then later in the autopsy, the coroner said that Chris Benoit's brain looked like it was so banged up and so damaged and so messed up. They said it looks like that of a 90-year-old Alzheimer's patient. He had the brain of a 90-year-old Alzheimer's patient from all the concussions and all the damage that was done to his brain over the years, that they suspect clearly would have affected him, affected his behavior. It's like, anyway, it's just a fascinating story. And that's the one I'm curious to see. It's a dangerous movie to make, but that's the one that I'm really most curious to see. Let's see. Let's go on to this. This one comes to us from Jordan Solis, who writes, John, do you think the Gambit movie will be rated R? Good question. I don't think so. I don't think that it will be. I think they're going to go a hard PG-13, because, there are not all PG-13s are alike. I think they'll go for a hard PG-13, and I could be wrong. They may go R, but Gambit, I don't know that you need to be R. Deadpool, I think you could have done Deadpool PG-13, but it worked best in an R rating. I think you could have done Logan as a hard PG-13, but they went for the R and it worked. I don't know that Gambit needs to be rated R. Again, it's hard to say when we don't know what kind of movie it's going to be, but if I had to make an advanced, just wild guess, my advanced wild guess is that Gambit will be PG-13. That's my guess. But it's got every chance in the world of being rated R. We'll have to wait and see. But my guess would be that it would be a PG-13. All right, let's go to the next one. And the next one comes to us from Mujtaba26397, who writes, John, over or under 30%, Avengers Infinity War will break the $2 billion mark. I'll go under 30%. I'll go under. It's going to make huge money. It's going to be wildly successful, but I will take the under on that. Look, the biggest, most successful Marvel film of all time. Give me a second, and I'm going to pull this up here just to be sure. I think the most successful any Marvel film has ever been was like 1.5 billion. So let me just double check this here. The most successful Marvel film of all time, was Marvel's The Avengers, and it was 1.5 billion. And Anne is trying to sneak in. We can see you in the mirror. There's no point in trying to sneak around. She's going back to work today. Hey, babe. Have a good day. She's sneaking off to work today. Anyway, the most successful one has been Marvel The Avengers. And that's a 1.5 billion. You're talking about it making an additional $500 million over top of that. And if Captain America Civil War didn't make that kind of money, didn't come anywhere near it, didn't even make 1.5, if Avengers Ultron, Age of Ultron didn't do it, then I don't see why you would suspect that another one will. If all these movies did, remember, and it's not like Avengers came in at 1.9 billion and all it has to do is make another 100 million. It didn't. The most successful one they've ever had is 1.5. To expect this next one to just assume that it's going to hit 2 billion, I think that's overly optimistic and an unfair bar That's an unfair bar to set for the film. It doesn't make any sense. So is it impossible for it to hit 2 billion? Absolutely not. It's not impossible. Is it incredibly unlikely? I won't even say it's incredibly unlikely, but 30% is too high of a number. Too high of a number. I'll say 15% chance it has it hitting 2 billion. But yeah, so like, look, history says it won't. History says it won't. I don't know why we suddenly magically think now it'll hit $2 billion. The math seems to be against it. I will give it a chance. It has a chance at hitting 2 billion, but I'll go 15%. I just think that 30% number is way too high. All right, let's move on to the next one. And the next one comes to us from JPEG1098 says, John, since you saw Only the Brave, what are your expectations now for Joseph Kosinski directing Top Gun 2 as his next film? Very, very different films. And you know what? I'm still not positive Top Gun 2 is going to happen. I know Tom Cruise has got on TV shows and say, yep, we're definitely doing it and all that kind of stuff. I get that. But if there was an I would set the over-under number of Top Gun 2 actually happening at 22%. I just have a feeling it's not going to happen because you know what? They announced it. Tom Cruise going around talking about it. People have not been acting with excitement about it. I don't think it's received the response that they were hoping it would receive. So it's a tough one. I'm not quite sure that movie's even going to happen. All right, thanks a lot for the question. Let's move on to the next one now. I've got a few more I'm going to take here. And this next one comes to us from Culture Inject. I like that Twitter name. That's great. Writes, on the show the other day, you said you don't think that Joss will direct Batgirl anymore. Why is that? Well, yeah, I've got a couple of reasons for that. And again, I'm not saying it's 100% that Joss Whedon won't direct Batgirl. I'm saying I've got a suspicion. It's just a suspicion that he won't direct Batgirl. For two main reasons. One, I think they're going to be happy with Justice League and they're going to want to leverage Joss Whedon for Justice League. Justice League 2. I think they're going to get him to do Justice League 2, which would default take him away from Batgirl. The second thing, while a lot of people were making a big deal out of that little controversy that's going around that his wife said that he cheated on her, I really don't think anybody cares. But if any movie is going to be affected by that kind of controversy, then I think it would be Whedon making his next movie that he does after Justice League a female-centric film that could get people talking and could upset some people. And I would get that. I would totally get that. So you combine that with the fact that I think they're going to be happy with Justice League and they'll want to repurpose him from Batgirl to Justice League anyway to go along with the controversy and how it affects with a female-centric movie and all that kind of stuff. That makes me suspect that we won't see Joss Whedon directing Batgirl, but rather something else in the DC Cinematic Universe. If I had to put an over-under number on it, I would put it right down the middle at 50%. That would be my guess, is 50% at that. Okay, let's try the next one. And this next one comes to us from rdrago66 who writes, John, what was it about Red Sparrow that made it a top 10 film for you over films like Wrinkle in Time, Predator, and Ready Player One? Well, it was the trailer. It's the trailer and the premise. These like KGB Soviet era stuff, I've got a soft spot for those kinds of movies. The fact that you got Joel Edgerton in there, who I think is one of the most, under guys like Chiwetel Ejiofor and the like, but seriously, one of the most underrated performers out there is Joel Edgerton. I think he's magnificent. Jennifer Lawrence, I think, is one of the best actresses on the planet. The story looks phenomenal. I'm totally on board for that. Wrinkle in Time, I never loved the trailer. Never loved that trailer. So I know a lot of you guys did love the trailer. Awesome. I didn't love the trailer, so I can't put it in my top 10 most anticipated. Predator, hey, look, let's be honest. Predator over the past 20 years has had a questionable run. Now, granted, you got Shane Black in there. I love Shane Black. I got all the trust in the world in Shane Black. But until I see something that convinces me Predator should be in my top 10 most anticipated, not including comic book movies or Star Wars related movies, that doesn't go up there. Ready Player One, being directed by who I say is the all-time greatest filmmaker, Steven Spielberg. My number one all-time favorite filmmaker, Steven Spielberg. And the trailer's good. And I can't put my finger on it. But something with the trailer just didn't feel quite right to me. Even though I liked the trailer, I enjoyed it. I had a good time watching it. I've watched it many times. There's something elusive about it that I cannot put my finger on or quantify. that isn't quite sitting right with me. And so I'm in a little bit of a wait and see mode with Ready Player One. I'm sure it'll be great. I'm sure it will. But for now, it pained me not to put a Steven Spielberg film in my top 10 most anticipated. But that's why Red Sparrow to me did put in there. I'm a sucker for these types of stories. I love that whole Soviet era kind of stuff. It's a fabulous cast. The trailer I thought looked magnificent and had the right tone. So that's why it made it in there instead of those other films that you mentioned to me. But I'm sure all your guys' lists will look totally different than mine. And that's cool. That's the best thing about being a film fan. Okay, let's go with Dave Coca, who writes, John, after 4 episodes, what are your thoughts on Fox's The Gifted? I haven't seen episode 4 yet. I gotta say, I was skeptical at Comic-Con this year when they were talking all about The Gifted. But you know what? I have liked what I've seen so far. I'm a fan. I am a fan. And you know what? I'll tell you guys this. Don't spread it around. It looks like I'm probably going to start a weekly show talking about that week in the superhero television shows. So we'll all talk about Arrow, Flash, probably Legends, The Gifted, things like that, and do a weekly show. And I've got somebody who's probably going to do it with me, and I won't announce who that is yet because we're still working out trying to get the schedules worked out. But anyway, keep your eye open for that, and maybe we'll do something. Okay, let's see. Matt Yamasaki writes, who would you cast as the next Bond after Craig hangs up the tux for good? There are many guys, any actor, anytime, as long as it's a good actor, it's fine with me, blah, 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 blah. Out of the people who are most commonly referenced, if you want to ask me about which of the guys who are most commonly referenced for possibly being the next James Bond, whether it's like a Luke Evans, a Tom Hiddleston, an Idris Elba, guys like that, I'm going to go Tom Hiddleston. I actually think that, don't get me wrong, I'll be happy with any talented actor they put in. That includes a Luke Evans or an Idris Elba. I'll be totally happy with any of them. But if you're going to ask me out of the ones who are most commonly mentioned, I'll go Tom Hiddleston. But I really don't care. Just put a good talented actor in there that you think will fit the role, and I'm totally happy with it. Next one comes to us from Timmy66810852, writes, John, what are your thoughts on an Edge of Tomorrow sequel? Love the idea. I love that first movie. The first movie was amazing. One of the most horrible marketing campaigns in the history of film, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they do with that. All right, and finally, the last question of the day. And the last question today, if I can even get it pulled up here, is thank you, Bobby, LOL. That's why a lot of Hollywood trades are saying Power Rangers. Sorry, your tweet was too long, so it got cut off. So anyway, that will do it for me, guys, for today's installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you so much for joining me. Listen, guys, while you're here, take a second. Click on that subscribe button, become a subscriber, and listen. Also, I forgot to do my Patreon plug. Let me do my shameless Patreon plug right now. This show and all the videos I do are only made possible. I can only do this full time because of the support of my Patreon supporters. Do me a favor, guys. If you are somebody who watches my videos and enjoys my videos, go on over to www.patreon.com/John Campea. Check out what it means to be a Patreon supporter of mine, all the reasons why we really need Patreon supporters, and the benefits that come along with being a Patreon supporter. And maybe you guys can consider becoming one of my Patreon supporters as well. It would help me out a lot. And if you don't, that's totally fine too. Also, guys, make sure you follow me on social media on Facebook and on Twitter, simply @John Campea. That will do it for me, guys, for this installment of the show. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to come back again tomorrow and do this a little bit more. My name's John Campea, and until next time, bye-bye.